The sun dipped low beneath the horizon, casting long shadows across the barren countryside as Emma's car sputtered to a halt on the edge of a lonely dirt road. Her breath came in shallow gasps, each movement sending sharp pangs through her swollen belly. The pregnancy, now well into its 7th month, weighed heavily on her, a constant reminder of the fragility she felt creeping beneath her skin. She glanced around, but all that stretched before her was miles of empty fields, their dry stalks rustling softly in the evening breeze. No houses, no signs of life. Just the fading light and the steady hammer of her heartbeat. Emma's fingers trembled as she reached for the glove compartment, hoping for a phone. But the screen was black, dead from lack of signal and battery. She was alone, stranded with no means to call for help, no money, no friends nearby. The eviction notice that had arrived only days ago still burned in her mind. The final blow after months of struggling to keep her life together. The city had become a hostile place, cold and unforgiving. And now she found herself at the edge of nowhere, desperate and vulnerable. Before we continue, make sure to like and subscribe to never miss a new video. And tell me, where are you watching this video from? I love seeing all different people come together for these stories. She pressed her hands against her hips, trying to ease the cramping that had been building steadily since morning. It was the kind of pain that whispered warnings, though she couldn't yet tell if it was false alarm or something more urgent. The car's engine had coughed twice before dying completely, leaving behind an eerie silence broken only by the distant caw of a crow and the soft rustling of wind through dry grass. Emma's eyes scanned the horizon, searching for any sign of shelter. Then, faint and blurred by the twilight, an old farmhouse appeared, a squat silhouette against the dimming sky. Its outline was jagged and uneven, windows dark and empty like hollow eyes staring out from the past. The paint was peeling, the roof sagging in places, but it was the only structure within miles. A beacon of last resort. With a shaky breath, Emma reached for her door handle and stepped out onto the cold dirt, the gravel crunching beneath her worn boots. The chill in the air bit through her thin jacket, but she forced herself forward, each step heavier than the last. Her hands trembled as she fumbled with the rusted gate, pushing it open with a creak that seemed far too loud in the quiet evening. The farmhouse stood silent as a tomb, the front porch sagging under the weight of years and neglect. Emma hesitated, her heart pounding as she raised a hand to knock on the cracked door. But there was no answer. No light flickered inside. No sound stirred in the shadows beyond the windows. The house seemed abandoned, forgotten by time and people alike. Yet, it was shelter. And for now that was enough. Her fingers found the cold brass knob, turning it with a tentative twist. The door gave way with a groan, revealing a narrow hallway cloaked in deep shadows. The air inside was stale, thick with dust and the faint scent of wood rot. Emma stepped inside, the floorboards creaking underfoot, echoing through the empty rooms like ghosts of the past. She leaned against the door for a moment, closing her eyes to steady herself. The silence was suffocating, pressing down on her chest like a weight. But the alternative, standing alone outside with no place to go, was far worse. She pushed herself forward, moving deeper into the house, each step stirring clouds of dust that danced in the dying light, filtering through grimy windows. The living room was a cavern of shadows, furniture draped in moth-eaten sheets and cobwebs hanging from the ceiling like delicate traps. An old fireplace sat cold and empty, the mantel cracked and barren. Emma's gaze was drawn to the far corner, where a heavy wooden door stood firmly shut. A basement door, its surface scarred and worn. A knot of unease twisted in her stomach. The door was locked tight, secured with a rusted latch that looked as if it hadn't been opened in decades. She reached out, fingertips brushing the cold wood, feeling the rough grain beneath her skin. What could lie beneath? The question gnawed at her, but she pushed it aside. For now, she only needed rest, a place to catch her breath and gather strength. Emma moved toward the kitchen, the faint outlines of old cabinets and a sink visible beneath layers of dust and grime. A broken window let in a sliver of cold air, stirring loose papers that fluttered to the floor like forgotten memories. She found an old chair and sat down, pressing her hands to her belly, trying to quell the rising tide of panic that threatened to overwhelm her. Her mind raced back to the weeks before, to the moment she'd seen the 2 pink lines on the test, the shock and disbelief that followed. The joy and fear tangled in equal measure as she imagined the life growing inside her. But that hope had crumbled quickly. Her partner vanished without a word, leaving her to face everything alone. The eviction notice had come like a hammer blow, stripping away the last threads of security she had. Now, stranded on this desolate road with a dead phone and no car, she felt the full weight of her isolation. The farmhouse, with its peeling paint and locked basement door, was her only refuge. A soft creak echoed from somewhere above, startling her. She looked up, eyes wide, but saw nothing beyond the shifting shadows. The house seemed to inhale, settling deeper into its own silence. Emma swallowed hard and wrapped her arms around herself, trying to summon courage from somewhere deep inside. She knew the night ahead would be long, and the road behind her was filled with loss and fear. But as the last light slipped away, she resolved to stay, at least until morning. The farmhouse might be old and forgotten, but for now, it was a shelter from the storm. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window panes and stirring the dry leaves into a restless dance. Inside, Emma closed her eyes and rested her head against the cold wall, focusing on the steady rhythm of her breathing and the small miracle growing inside her. The journey was far from over, and the darkness beyond the basement door held its own secrets. But for now, she was safe. At least for tonight. The farmhouse settled into a heavy silence as night deepened, shadows thickening in the corners of the dimly lit room where Emma sat huddled on the worn chair. Outside, the wind whispered mournfully through the skeletal branches of leafless trees, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and decay. Inside, the stale air pressed in on her, mingling with memories she had tried to keep buried, now rising unbidden like ghosts from a past too painful to confront. Her hands rested lightly on her rounded belly, fingers tracing the invisible contours beneath her shirt. The tiny life inside was a fragile flicker of hope amidst the storm that had been her existence these past months. Yet, the calm she sought was elusive, chased away by the sharp edges of fear and uncertainty that clawed at her mind. Emma's thoughts drifted back to the moment she had first discovered she was pregnant, a moment that had shattered her carefully constructed world. It was a chilly autumn morning when the realization dawned, stark and undeniable. The pregnancy test, clutched tightly in trembling hands, had revealed 2 pink lines, a symbol of new life and the weight of responsibility she had not been prepared to bear. That day, her emotions had been a tempest. Joy mingled with terror, hope entwined with dread. She had imagined a future that suddenly seemed both impossible and necessary. But the fragile hope was soon eclipsed by the harsh reality of abandonment. Her partner, once a steady presence in her life, had disappeared without explanation shortly after the news. No arguments, no farewells, just silence. The calls went unanswered, messages unread. His absence was a gaping wound, a betrayal that left her isolated and vulnerable. The man she had trusted, the person she had imagined standing beside her through the trials ahead, had vanished like a ghost. The city apartment that had once been their shared sanctuary became a prison of despair. The eviction notice slid through the mail slot like a final sentence, a cruel reminder that stability was slipping through her fingers. The landlord's curt words echoed in her mind, cold and unyielding. "You have 30 days. No exceptions." Faced with the impossible choice of staying or leaving, Emma packed what little she could carry, leaving behind the remnants of a life unraveling thread by thread. The streets she once walked with confidence now felt alien and hostile, the faces of strangers indifferent or suspicious. She had no family nearby, no friends to turn to, only the growing life inside her and the mounting pressure to survive. The night she fled the city was a blur of headlights and rain, her car weaving through darkened roads as anxiety tightened its grip. The eviction had forced her out, but the weight of loneliness and fear was the heaviest burden she carried. Each mile away from the city was a step into the unknown, a descent into uncertainty. Now, sitting in the silence of the farmhouse, Emma wrestled with the question that had plagued her since her partner's disappearance. Was she to face this alone? The thought was suffocating, yet she had no choice but to confront it. The life growing inside her was a beacon, a reason to fight. But the path forward was shrouded in shadows. Her eyes flicked toward the locked basement door, the dark woods seeming to pulse with secrets she dared not explore yet. The house was a stranger, its silence both a comfort and a threat. She debated whether to stay or push onward, but exhaustion tugged relentlessly at her limbs, and the chill of the night seeped through the cracked window panes. Emma wrapped her arms tightly around herself, drawing what warmth she could from her own body. The basement door's locked latch was a constant reminder of the mysteries this place held, mysteries that stirred a primal unease deep within her. But the thought of facing the night alone outside, with no shelter and no help, was far worse. Her mind drifted again, this time to the moments before her partner's disappearance. They had argued once, a rare fracture in their fragile relationship. He had spoken of leaving, chasing a new job opportunity in a distant city, promising he would return. But the promise was broken, evaporating like mist in the morning sun. The silence that followed was deafening, swallowing her pleas and questions. The eviction notice arrived soon after, a cruel punctuation to the unraveling story. Without income and support, Emma found herself trapped in a tightening spiral. The shelter she sought was out of reach, waiting lists too long, resources stretched thin. Desperation had driven her to the edge, and now here she was, alone on this deserted road, clutching at the fragile hope the old farmhouse offered. Her breaths came uneven, the ache in her belly intensifying with the weight of worry. Sleep was elusive, her mind racing with every worst-case scenario. Would she be safe here? Who had lived in this house before? Why was the basement door locked so tightly? The questions circled in her head like vultures, waiting to pick apart her resolve. Emma's thoughts turned inward, a silent conversation with the child inside her. She vowed to protect this tiny life, to find strength she never knew she had. The journey ahead would be hard, but surrender was not an option. She owed it to herself and to the unborn baby growing inside her to keep fighting, no matter the cost. Outside, the wind howled softly, carrying the distant echo of something unspoken. The farmhouse seemed to watch her, a silent sentinel guarding its secrets. Emma glanced once more at the basement door, hesitation mingling with a flicker of determination. For now, she would rest and gather strength. Tomorrow, she would decide the next step. As the night deepened, the weight of her memories settled alongside the weight of her body. Fear and hope wove together into a fragile tapestry, a story of survival and uncertainty. Emma closed her eyes, willing herself to find peace, even as the shadows whispered their quiet warnings. In the stillness, the past and present collided, a reminder that the path she walked was shaped by loss, but also by the fierce will to endure. The farmhouse held its secrets tight, and so must she hold her own. The night was long, and the road ahead unknown, but Emma was determined to face whatever came, for the life she carried and the future she dared to dream. The morning light filtered weakly through the grimy windows, casting a muted glow over the farmhouse's interior. Emma stirred on the creaky wooden chair where she had spent the night, her body aching but grateful for the rest. Dust motes floated lazily in the shafts of pale sunlight, settling on faded wallpaper that peeled away from the walls in curling strips. The house groaned softly, as if waking from a long slumber, its wooden bones creaking beneath the weight of years and neglect. Emma pushed herself upright, her joints stiff and sore. She wrapped her arms around her swollen belly, drawing strength from the steady, rhythmic flutter within. The baby was a steady heartbeat beneath her fingertips, a lifeline amid the uncertainty. She rose slowly and began to explore the room, her eyes adjusting to the dimness as she took in the details of the farmhouse. The living room was a patchwork of dust-covered furniture and forgotten relics. A threadbare armchair sat askew near the fireplace, its upholstery faded and torn. A heavy wooden table stood in the center, scarred by years of use and neglect. Against one wall, a tall bookcase leaned precariously, its shelves cluttered with dusty tomes and brittle papers. The air carried a faint scent of mildew and old wood, mingling with the faint aroma of earth and decay that seeped through the cracked window panes. Emma's gaze was drawn to a faded photograph resting on the mantel, a black and white image of a family, their faces blurred by time, but their presence undeniable. She traced the edges of the frame with a tentative finger, feeling the roughness of dust and chipped paint. The pictures seemed to whisper stories of a life once lived here, of moments frozen beneath layers of dust and silence. Her curiosity led her further into the house, each step stirring clouds of dust that danced in the weak sunlight. The kitchen was a cramped space, cluttered with rusted utensils and chipped crockery. Cabinets hung open, their empty shelves revealing warped wood and faded paint. A broken window let in a cold breeze, sending a shiver down Emma's spine. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, the chill seeping through her thin clothes. In the corner of the kitchen, a collection of old farm tools lay scattered across the floor. Rusted sickles, bent pitchforks, and cracked wooden handles. They spoke of a life tethered to the land, of hands calloused by labor and days spent beneath the sun. Emma imagined the people who had once lived here, their laughter and toil echoing faintly in her mind. Despite the eerie quiet, the farmhouse held an undeniable charm, a stubborn resilience that mirrored her own. It was a place forgotten by the world, yet still standing, still breathing beneath layers of dust and shadow. Emma felt a strange kinship with the house, a silent understanding born of shared endurance. But her attention was inevitably drawn back to the basement door, its dark wood scarred and locked tight. The heavy latch seemed to thrum with a quiet menace, a boundary between the known and the unknown. Emma's heart quickened as she approached it, fingers hovering just above the cold surface. The lock was rusted, the key long lost, or so it seemed. She hesitated, torn between the need for answers and the instinct to flee from whatever might lurk below. The house held secrets, and the basement door was a barrier she was not yet ready to cross. Yet the mystery gnawed at her, a silent challenge that stirred a restless flicker of courage. Emma's thoughts drifted back to the night before, to the strange noises that had echoed through the house, the creaks and groans that seemed to come from beneath the floorboards. She had told herself it was the house settling, the inevitable sounds of age and decay. But now, in the harsh light of day, the unease lingered like a shadow at the edge of her mind. She moved away from the door, stepping back into the living room, where a faded quilt lay draped over the armchair. The fabric was worn and threadbare, its colors muted by time. Emma folded it carefully, pressing it to her cheek as if it might offer some small comfort against the cold and loneliness. Her gaze fell upon a small wooden table cluttered with forgotten objects. An old lantern, a cracked teapot, and a stack of yellowed letters tied with a fraying ribbon. She picked up the letters, their edges brittle and delicate, the ink faded but still legible. The handwriting was elegant, looping, and precise, a glimpse into lives once lived and words once spoken. Emma sat down, unfolding the top letter with trembling hands. The words spoke of days spent tending to the fields, of hopes and fears shared between family members, separated by distance and time. She felt a pang of connection, a sense that she was not entirely alone in this forgotten place. The hours passed slowly as Emma explored the farmhouse, uncovering fragments of a story etched into its very walls. She found a rusted key tucked beneath a loose floorboard, its metal cold and heavy in her palm. It was a small victory, a tangible link to the mysteries locked away in the basement. Yet the key also deepened her unease. What lay behind that heavy door? What secrets had been hidden away for so long? The questions circled in her mind, refused to be silenced. But for now, exhaustion claimed her, and she retreated to the worn armchair, pulling the faded quilt around her shoulders. Emma closed her eyes, the weight of the day pressing down upon her. The farmhouse was a place of contrasts, comfort and fear, past and present, warmth and cold. It was a refuge, yes, but also a reminder that shelter often comes entwined with uncertainty. Outside, the wind stirred once more, rattling the broken window panes and sending a shiver through the house. Emma pressed her palms against her belly, feeling the steady flutter of life beneath her hands. The journey ahead was fraught with unknowns, but for now, she had this small moment of peace. As the afternoon light waned, Emma allowed herself to rest, gathering strength for whatever lay beyond the locked door and the shadows it guarded. The farmhouse was no longer just a shelter from the night. It was a place where the past whispered its secrets, waiting to be uncovered. That night, the farmhouse seemed to breathe with a life of its own. Emma lay awake on the sagging mattress she'd found in what must have once been the master bedroom, the thin blanket barely warding off the chill that seeped through cracked plaster walls. Outside, the wind rattled the loose window panes, sending eerie whispers through the empty rooms. Every creak and groan of the old house echoed like a ghost's murmur, settling deep into her bones. Sleep was elusive. Her mind refused to quiet, circling back to the locked basement door and the strange noises she'd heard beneath the floorboards. She had told herself earlier that the sounds were nothing more than the house settling. its wooden frame contracting and expanding as temperatures fell. But now, as darkness pressed in, the noises took on a more sinister cadence. A faint tapping, like fingernails rapping against wood, and the soft scrape of something being dragged across the floor below. The basement door loomed at the edge of her vision, an ominous barrier to an unknown world. Restless, Emma pushed herself up and slipped quietly from the bed. The floorboards creaked softly beneath her feet as she moved through the shadowed hallway. Her breath came in shallow bursts, the chill in the air prickling her skin. She paused before the basement door, its dark surface looming in the moonlight that filtered through the cracked window nearby. Her fingers hovered over the rusted latch, uncertainty warring with a growing resolve. The day's discovery of an old key, found hidden beneath a loose floorboard in the kitchen, felt suddenly significant. The metal was cold and heavy in her palm, its weight promising answers she both craved and feared. She slid the key into the lock, the rusty mechanism protesting with a grinding creak. With a deep breath, she turned it, feeling the latch give way with a reluctant click. The door swung open slowly, revealing a narrow staircase descending into blackness. A musty, damp odor wafted upward, carrying the unmistakable scent of earth and decay. Emma swallowed hard, steeling herself against the chill that seemed to seep from the darkness below. She reached for the flashlight she'd found in one of the kitchen drawers, its beam weak but steady. Stepping cautiously onto the first stair, she descended, the wooden steps creaking beneath her weight. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the basement itself exhaled a breath long held. Shadows clung to every corner, swallowing the edges of her flashlight's beam. The walls were rough stone, slick with moisture, and the faint drip of water echoed in the silence. Emma's heart hammered in her chest, each beat a loud drum in the oppressive stillness. Her eyes darted from one shadow to another, searching for any sign of life or death. The basement stretched before her, a cavernous space cluttered with the remnants of forgotten years. Old crates and broken tools lay scattered, coated in thick layers of dust and cobwebs. As she moved deeper, the beam of her flashlight caught on something unexpected. A cluster of rusted metal cages, their heavy doors padlocked shut. The sight sent a jolt of cold through her veins. The cages were small, barely large enough for a person to sit, their bars bent and scarred. Nearby, torn blankets lay crumpled on the floor, stained and faded with age. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Questions surged like a rising tide. What were these cages used for? Who had been kept here? The basement suddenly felt suffocating, the weight of history pressing down like the thick stone walls surrounding her. She bent down to examine a newspaper clipping pinned to the wall, its edges yellowed and brittle. The headline blared, "Local woman disappears without a trace." Another clipping, dated decades earlier, told of similar disappearances in the area. Names, dates, lives vanished like smoke. Emma's fingers trembled as she traced the faded print, the stories weaving a tapestry of fear and mystery connected to this very house. A sudden noise above, a creak, a footstep, made her jump, heart leaping into her throat. The silence that followed was thick, pregnant with uncertainty. She forced herself to breathe slowly, reminding herself she was alone, safe for now. Yet the basement whispered secrets she was only beginning to unravel. Emma moved toward the far corner, where a heavy wooden chest sat half-hidden beneath a tarp. The chest was locked, its iron bands rusted but intact. She tried the key in the lock, but it didn't fit. Frustration and curiosity warred within her as she circled the basement, flashlight revealing more broken furniture, faded photographs pinned to the wall, and strange symbols scratched into the stone. The basement was a time capsule of neglect and something darker, something that hinted at pain and captivity. Emma's mind raced with possibilities, each more unsettling than the last. The cages, the newspaper clippings, the locked chest, all pieces of a puzzle she was terrified to solve. As she prepared to ascend the stairs, a sudden cold breeze swept through the basement, extinguishing her flashlight with a flicker. Darkness enveloped her like a shroud. Panic surged, but she forced herself to calm down, fumbling with the flashlight until the beam steadied again. Climbing the stairs, she hesitated at the threshold, glancing back once more at the dim basement below. The house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her next move. Back in the living room, Emma locked the basement door behind her, sliding the old key into a hidden crevice beneath the floorboard where she had found it. The house settled once more, silence reclaiming its dominion. Emma sank into the worn armchair, her mind racing with the dark discoveries. The basement was no longer just a locked room. It was a portal to a past filled with shadows and unanswered questions. Fear and determination mingled within her, fueling a resolve she hadn't known she possessed. Outside, the wind howled again, rattling the windows and stirring the dry leaves into restless swirls. Emma closed her eyes, pressing her hands gently to her belly. The night was long and the darkness deep, but for the first time since she'd arrived, she felt the stirrings of purpose beneath the weight of fear. Tomorrow, she would face the secrets of the basement again. Tonight, she would gather strength for the journey ahead. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she stood once more before the basement door, the weight of the previous night's discoveries settling heavy in her chest. The farmhouse around her was cloaked in a gray, restless dawn, the weak morning light filtering through smudged windows and casting long shadows across the cracked floorboards. She clutched the flashlight tightly, the cold metal a small comfort against the growing unease that churned inside her. Her fingers trembled as she slid the key from its hiding place beneath the loose floorboard. The lock gave way with a reluctant click, the door creaking open to reveal the narrow, descending staircase shrouded in darkness. The familiar damp scent rose to greet her, a mix of earth, mold, and something older, something forgotten. Step by tentative step, Emma descended, her flashlight piercing the gloom with a wavering beam. The basement's cold stone walls closed in, rough and slick with moisture. Her heartbeat thundered in her ears, each creak of the wooden steps echoing like a warning. She reached the bottom, the floor uneven beneath her boots, littered with debris and dust. Before her lay the unsettling tableau she had glimpsed the night before. Rusted metal cages, their doors firmly padlocked, scattered across the floor like forgotten relics. Emma's eyes widened as the beam of light swept over torn blankets, stained and frayed, discarded carelessly beside the cages. The sight twisted her stomach into knots. How many had been confined here? How long had these cages remained sealed in silence? Her gaze flickered to a corner where a small wooden table stood, cluttered with faded photographs and yellowed papers. She stepped closer, the floor groaning underfoot. The photographs showed smiling faces, frozen in time, their eyes bright yet haunting. Emma traced a finger over one image. A young woman holding a child, both unaware of the darkness that had claimed their home. Tucked beneath the photographs, Emma found a stack of old newspaper clippings, brittle and worn. She unfolded the top article carefully, her eyes scanning the faded print. The headline screamed, "Local woman vanishes without a trace." The article spoke of mysterious disappearances in the surrounding area, women who had simply vanished over the years, their stories left unresolved. A cold shiver ran down Emma's spine as she read on. Names, dates, snippets of whispered rumors, the pieces of a grim puzzle falling into place. The farmhouse, once a quiet refuge, was now a monument to untold suffering. Suddenly, a sharp noise sliced through the silence. A soft thud from the floor above. Emma froze, heart pounding as the sound echoed again, a footstep perhaps, deliberate and slow. She swung the flashlight beam upward, but the dim stairs swallowed the light. The house seemed to hold its breath, the walls pressing in with an oppressive weight. Emma's mind raced. Was she truly alone? Or had someone, or something, been watching her since she arrived? She swallowed the rising panic, gripping the flashlight tighter, determined to uncover the truth despite the fear gnawing at her resolve. She moved toward the far end of the basement, where a heavy wooden chest sat partially concealed beneath a threadbare tarp. Its iron bands were rusted, the lock intact. Emma tried the key she carried, but it didn't fit. Frustration mingled with dread as she studied the chest, imagining what secrets it might hold, letters, diaries, evidence of the horrors hinted at by the cages and clippings. A sudden sound, a scraping, low and deliberate, made her whip around. The flashlight caught on a shadow slipping just beyond the beam's reach. Emma's breath hitched, muscles tensing. Was it the wind? Her imagination? Or something more sinister lurking in the basement's depths? Steeling herself, she called out softly, "Hello? Is someone there?" Only silence answered, thick and suffocating. The shadow vanished, leaving her alone once more with the ghosts of the past. Emma's thoughts flickered to the locked basement door upstairs, to the heavy latch she had opened despite the warnings etched into every corner of this place. The farmhouse was no longer just a shelter. It was a prison of memories, a vault of dark secrets. Her hand pressed against her belly, the steady flutter within a small beacon of life amidst the darkness. The journey she had begun was fraught with danger, but turning back was not an option. She needed to know what had happened here. To the women who had disappeared, to the lives shattered and hidden beneath layers of dust and silence. The basement groaned again, the house settling, or something else stirring in the shadows. Emma took a shaky breath and began to retrace her steps toward the stairs, each footfall purposeful despite the tremor in her limbs. As she ascended, the familiar scent of damp stone gave way to the stale air of the upper rooms. Her fingers locked the basement door behind her, the click of the latch echoing like a final seal on the horrors below. She slid the key back beneath the floorboard, hiding it from prying eyes. Emma leaned against the cold wall, closing her eyes to steady the storm within. The farmhouse held its secrets close, but she was no longer afraid. Each discovery, each piece of the tangled history, only strengthened her resolve. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying the faintest hint of a warning. Emma pressed her hands to her belly, feeling the fragile life inside respond to her touch. The past might be dark and filled with fear, but the future, her future, was yet to be written. For now she would rest, gathering strength for the challenges to come. The farmhouse was a place of shadows, but within those shadows, Emma would find the courage to face whatever lay ahead. The next morning, the farmhouse lay silent beneath a gray sky, the weight of the previous night's discoveries pressing heavily on Emma's mind. She rose slowly, her body aching and her breath shallow, a dull throb radiating from her belly, reminding her of the fragile life she carried. The basement door loomed in the corner of the living room, its dark wood heavy with secrets. Yet, the key she had found the day before burned hot in her pocket, a small talisman that promised answers. Emma moved cautiously toward the door, heart pounding as she slid the key from its hiding place beneath the floorboard. The lock clicked open with surprising ease, as if the house itself was willing to reveal its hidden truths. She pushed the door open, descending once more into the damp, cold basement. The flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the rusted cages and scattered remnants of a forgotten past. But this time, Emma noticed something she hadn't seen before. A narrow passageway partially obscured by fallen debris and cobwebs, tucked behind a stack of old crates. The passage was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, its entrance swallowed by shadows. Her pulse quickened. The farmhouse was revealing itself piece by piece, each secret more unsettling than the last. Emma's fingers brushed against the rough stone wall as she edged into the passage. The air growing colder and the scent heavier with the musk of earth and decay. The narrow corridor twisted and turned, the flashlight's beam dancing across scuffed walls and piles of discarded belongings. Emma's footsteps echoed softly as she pressed onward, the weight of the unknown pressing down upon her chest. At the end of the passage, she found a small wooden door, its surface scarred and worn. With trembling hands, she pushed it open, revealing a cramped room bathed in dim light, filtering through a grimy window high on the wall. The room was a hidden sanctuary, a stark contrast to the rest of the basement. Shelves lined with dusty journals, stacks of letters tied with faded ribbons, and a small wooden desk cluttered with papers and photographs. Emma approached the desk, her fingers hovering over the scattered documents. She picked up a leather-bound journal, its cover cracked and brittle, and began to read. The handwriting was neat but hurried, filled with accounts of daily life on the farm. But soon the entries grew darker, more desperate. The journal belonged to a woman named Margaret, the farmhouse's former occupant. Her words painted a picture of a woman trapped in a nightmare, a witness to sinister deeds happening beneath the surface of everyday life. Margaret wrote of neighbors disappearing, of strange men arriving at odd hours, and of the cages in the basement used to imprison those who were taken. Emma's eyes widened as she read on, the horror and helplessness palpable in each entry. Margaret documented her attempts to warn others, her fears of retaliation, and finally, her decision to hide these journals in this secret room, hoping one day someone would uncover the truth. Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she traced the lines describing the kidnappings, the pain of families torn apart, and the suffocating silence that followed. The farmhouse was not merely a refuge for her. It was a tomb for countless lost souls. Among the letters, Emma found correspondence between Margaret and local authorities. Pleas for help, reports ignored or dismissed. The corruption and fear that allowed these horrors to continue were etched into every page. Emma's resolve hardened. She was now the keeper of these stories, the bearer of an unbearable truth. But the weight of the knowledge was suffocating. The farmhouse's dark history pressed down on her, threatening to crush the fragile hope she nurtured for her unborn child. Escape seemed urgent, yet her body reminded her of its limits. The pregnancy made fleeing impossible, trapping her in this house filled with shadows. Emma sank to the floor, clutching the journal to her chest. The silence around her was thick, broken only by the distant drip of water and the soft rustle of paper. She knew she could not stay silent, could not let these secrets die in the darkness. Gathering strength, she began to make notes, copying passages from the journals and letters, piecing together a timeline of the disappearances and the farmhouse's sinister role. Each word was a step toward justice, a beacon in the suffocating gloom. Hours passed unnoticed as Emma lost herself in the task, the farmhouse's oppressive atmosphere fading beneath the urgency of her purpose. Yet, beneath her determination lurked a growing fear. Who else knew these secrets, and would they come for her to keep silence? The farmhouse seemed to listen, its creaks and sighs a reminder that history was alive here, watching, waiting. Emma pressed her palms to her belly, feeling the small, steady movements that anchored her to the present, to life. She rose slowly, the journal tucked safely in her bag. The farmhouse's shadows were deep, but so was her resolve. She would confront whatever darkness lay ahead, for herself and for the lost voices she now carried. As she ascended the basement stairs, the weight of the past and the hope for the future intertwined, a fragile balance she vowed to protect. The journey was far from over, but Emma had found a purpose amidst the ruins, a reason to fight through the shadows. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the grimy windows, casting a warm glow over the peeling wallpaper and cracked floorboards of the farmhouse. Emma stood near the kitchen table, clutching the worn leather journal she had found in the hidden room beneath the basement. The weight of the dark history she'd uncovered pressed heavily upon her, but a flicker of hope stirred within her, a hope that she was not entirely alone in this fight. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft creak of the front door opening. Startled, Emma turned just as a tall figure stepped cautiously inside. A man in his late 30s with weathered hands and a wary expression. His clothes were simple, worn from years of labor under the sun, and his eyes held a cautious kindness. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice rough but not unkind. "I'm Lucas. I live just down the road. I saw your car parked outside and thought you might need some help." Emma's heart quickened, a mixture of relief and hesitation washing over her. She studied him for a moment, weighing the sincerity in his gaze against the instinct to protect herself and her unborn child. The farmhouse had taught her caution, but Lucas's presence was a small beacon of light amid the shadows. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I'm Emma. I've been staying here for a few days. It's been difficult." Lucas nodded, stepping further inside and closing the door behind him. "I figured as much. This place has a reputation. Folks around here don't talk about it much. But I've heard whispers, things that don't sit right." Emma's pulse quickened. "You know about the farmhouse? The basement?" He nodded solemnly. "Yeah. There's been talk for years. Disappearances, strange noises, locked doors no one wants to open. I didn't believe it at first. But after a few things happened near my farm, I started to pay attention. I'm sorry you had to find out the hard way." Emma felt a flicker of gratitude and relief. For the first time since arriving, she wasn't alone in this. She motioned toward the worn armchair by the fireplace. "Please sit. I've found journals and letters, evidence of what happened here. But I don't know how to proceed." Lucas settled into the chair, his eyes thoughtful. "You're brave to dig into this. Most people would run the other way. Maybe it's time someone did something about it." Emma nodded, her fingers tightening around the journal. "I want to expose the truth, but I'm scared. For myself and my baby. Whoever was behind those disappearances might still be around." Lucas's jaw tightened. "You're right to be careful. But you don't have to do this alone. I can help. I know some folks in town who remember more than they let on. We can gather information quietly, build a case without drawing too much attention." A fragile hope blossomed within Emma. The isolation that had engulfed her began to lift, replaced by the possibility of alliance and strength. Together, they began to piece together the fragments of the farmhouse's dark past, sharing stories and suspicions that had long been buried beneath fear and silence. Lucas told her about the local farmer who had vanished years ago, the rumors of secret meetings in the dead of night, and the unexplained accidents that had plagued those who asked too many questions. Emma shared the journals and letters she had found, their contents painting a grim picture of corruption and cruelty. As the afternoon light faded into twilight, they mapped out a cautious plan. How to reach out to allies, how to protect Emma and her unborn child, and how to bring the farmhouse's secrets into the light without putting themselves in immediate danger. Lucas's presence was a steady anchor, a reminder that even in darkness, there were those willing to stand against it. For Emma, who had felt lost and alone, this unexpected alliance kindled a new strength. Before leaving, Lucas handed her a small, worn notebook. Keep track of everything, dates, names, any strange occurrences. It'll help when we talk to others. And if you ever feel in danger, don't hesitate to reach out. I'll be nearby. Emma accepted the notebook with trembling hands, her heart swelling with cautious optimism. The farmhouse still held its shadows, but together, they had begun to push back the darkness. As Lucas stepped out into the night, Emma watched the door close softly behind him. She pressed the notebook to her chest, feeling the steady flutter of life within her. A reminder that even amidst fear and uncertainty, new beginnings were possible. The farmhouse no longer felt quite so lonely. With Lucas's support, Emma found a fragile but growing hope, a promise that she could confront the past, protect her child, and forge a path toward healing and justice. The chill of the evening settled deep into the bones of the farmhouse, wrapping the rooms in shadows that seemed heavier than the night itself. Emma sat near the cracked window, clutching the small notebook Lucas had given her. The flickering candlelight danced across the pages, illuminating her hastily scrawled notes, names, dates, whispered rumors, and fragmented memories. The farmhouse's weight pressed down on her, but with Lucas's cautious friendship, a fragile sense of resolve had begun to take root. A sudden knock at the front door shattered the silence. Emma froze, the notebook slipping from her fingers onto the worn wooden floor. Her heart pounded wildly, a cold sweat prickling at the base of her neck. The knock came again, firm, deliberate, and unmistakably unwelcomed. She rose slowly, each movement deliberate, and crept toward the door. Peering through the cracked window pane, she saw a tall, shadowed figure standing against the dim glow of the porch light. The silhouette was unfamiliar, but the weight of menace radiated from it like a physical force. "Who is it?" Emma called out, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. No answer. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Emma's mind raced, recalling the dark history of the farmhouse and the warnings woven through the journals she had uncovered. The secrets she'd begun to unravel were dangerous, and now it seemed someone wanted to ensure she stayed silent. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the old brass doorknob, hesitating only a moment before pulling the door open just enough to peer outside. The man stepped forward into the weak light, his features sharp and cold, eyes narrowing as they locked onto hers. "You need to leave," he said quietly, his tone low and threatening. "Forget what you've seen. Forget this place. It's better for you and the child." Emma's breath caught. The voice was unfamiliar, but the warning was clear. This was no casual visitor. The air between them crackled with menace, the threat impossible to ignore. "I'm not going anywhere," she replied, her voice gaining strength despite the fear curling within her. I won't be intimidated." The man's gaze hardened, shadows flickering across his face. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," he warned. "This house holds things you can't begin to imagine. Walk away while you still can." Emma's fists clenched at her sides. The years of isolation, fear, and betrayal had forged a quiet steel within her. She thought of the unborn child beneath her ribs, the fragile life that depended on her courage. She would not be cowed by threats. Behind her, the soft click of the door opening startled both of them. Lucas stepped into the porch light, his expression grim but resolute. "Enough," he said firmly, stepping forward. "Emma's not alone, and she's not afraid." The man's eyes flicked toward Lucas, a flicker of recognition mingled with disdain. "You've made a mistake coming here," he spat. "This isn't over." With that, he turned and disappeared into the night, swallowed by the darkness like a shadow retreating into its lair. Emma exhaled slowly, relief mingled with lingering dread. The confrontation left no doubt. The farmhouse's secrets were guarded fiercely, and those who sought to protect them would not hesitate to threaten anyone who dared to pry. Lucas closed the door behind the departing figure, turning to Emma with a steady gaze. "They're watching. We have to be careful." Emma nodded, her fingers tightening around the notebook. "But I won't back down, not now." Together, they moved to secure the farmhouse, locking doors and windows, bolting the heavy basement door tight once more. The house, once a silent witness to decades of suffering, now stood as a battleground between darkness and the flickering hope that Emma carried within her. In the quiet moments that followed, Emma sat by the window, listening to the wind whisper through the trees. Fear remained, but it was tempered by a fierce determination. She was no longer just a victim of circumstance. She was a protector, a bearer of truth in a place where silence had reigned too long. The night stretched on, deep and endless. But within Emma, a spark burned steady, a promise to face whatever dangers lay ahead, to fight for herself and the life she carried, and to bring the farmhouse's buried secrets into the light. The storm had been gathering since early evening, clouds thick and swollen, blocking out the moon and stars. Inside the farmhouse, Emma's breaths came shallow and ragged, each one sharper than the last. The contractions had started hours ago, slow and irregular at first, then steadily growing in intensity. She clutched the faded quilt Lucas had brought her, the familiar fabric grounding her amid the mounting chaos. Lucas was at her side, calm but alert, his hands steady as he prepared a makeshift birthing space on the worn kitchen floor. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across peeling wallpaper and cracked tiles, the farmhouse holding its breath with them. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows and stirring the trees into a restless frenzy. Emma's body tensed with each wave of pain, sweat beading on her forehead despite the chill in the air. Fear gnawed at the edges of her mind, but she pushed it aside, focusing on the steady rhythm of her breathing and the tiny life she carried inside. This was no longer a question of survival alone, it was a fight for new beginnings. "Breathe with me," Lucas whispered, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. "You're doing great." The hours stretched on, a blur of pain and determination. The farmhouse, once a place of shadows and secrets, had transformed into a sanctuary of raw, primal life. Emma's cries mingled with the howling wind, a testament to resilience and hope. At last, with one final, shuddering effort, a wail pierced the darkness, a sharp, urgent sound that filled the cramped kitchen with the promise of new life. Emma collapsed back, exhaustion washing over her like a tide, and Lucas quickly wrapped the tiny, fragile body in a soft, clean cloth. Tears streamed down Emma's face as she reached out to hold her newborn daughter, the weight of the child in her arms grounding her in a way nothing else could. She whispered a name, soft and reverent, La Nena, a tribute to the strength that had carried her through the darkness. In that moment, the farmhouse, once a vessel of fear and despair, became a cradle of hope and renewal. The storm outside began to wane, the wind's fury settling into a gentle murmur, as if nature itself recognized the significance of the new life it had witnessed. Lucas sat beside Emma, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "She's strong," he said quietly, "just like her mother." Emma looked down at Ella Lenena, her heart swelling with a fierce love that eclipsed all the pain and fear that had come before. The journey had been harrowing, but the birth was a turning point, a beacon in the darkness signaling a fresh start. As dawn approached, the farmhouse was filled with a quiet calm. Emma cradled her daughter, feeling the steady rise and fall of her tiny chest, a rhythm that promised continuity and resilience. The shadows that had haunted these walls seemed to recede, pushed back by the fragile light of new life. In the days that followed, as Emma healed and bonded with her daughter, she found a renewed strength within herself. The farmhouse's secrets were still there, waiting to be uncovered and confronted. But she was no longer alone or helpless. With Lucas's steady support and the fierce love for Ella Lanena, Emma embraced her role as protector and advocate, not just for her family, but for the truths that demanded to be told. The journey ahead would not be easy, but Emma was ready. The farmhouse, once a place of fear, was now a symbol of survival and hope. And with her daughter in her arms, she faced the future with a courage born from the darkest nights and the brightest dawns. The farmhouse, once shrouded in silence and shadow, had become the heart of a quiet revolution. Word had spread slowly but steadily through the neighboring towns and villages of the woman who had uncovered long-buried truths and refused to be silenced. Emma stood on the porch one crisp morning, sunlight filtering through the budding branches, holding Ella Nena close against the warmth of her chest. The baby's soft breaths were a steady reminder of new beginnings, of life pressing forward despite the weight of the past. Inside the farmhouse, the atmosphere was alive with purpose. The faded walls, once cloaked in neglect, now bore signs of renewal. Painted in gentle hues, shelves lined with books and supplies, and the quiet hum of visitors sharing stories and seeking refuge. Emma had transformed the space into a sanctuary, a haven for women caught in storms of their own, a place where fear could be met with understanding and hope. Lucas moved through the rooms with practiced ease, assisting where needed, his presence a steady support. Together, they had woven a community out of the fragments left behind, a network bound by resilience and mutual care. The farmhouse's dark history had become a catalyst for healing, its secrets no longer chains, but lessons guiding their way forward. Emma's days were filled with meetings, planning sessions, and quiet moments of reflection. She had become a voice not only for herself, but for the countless women whose stories had been buried beneath layers of silence. The journals and letters she had uncovered were now part of a larger archive, their truths preserved and shared to prevent history from repeating itself. Local authorities, moved by the evidence and community support, had reopened investigations into the disappearances linked to the farmhouse. The process was slow and fraught with resistance, but the tide was turning. Emma and Lucas worked tirelessly, navigating the complexities of justice and advocacy, their determination unwavering. One afternoon, as Emma sat with la nena nestled in her lap, Mrs. Winters arrived, a woman of gentle demeanor and deep wisdom, who had once been the caretaker of the property. Her presence was a bridge between past and present, her stories adding depth and context to the farmhouse's legacy. "I'm proud of what you've done," Mrs. Winters said softly, her eyes glistening. "This place needed someone like you to breathe life back into it." Emma smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. The journey from fear to strength had been long and arduous. But standing here, surrounded by newfound allies and the promise of change, she knew it had been worth every struggle. As the sun dipped low, casting a golden glow over the fields, Emma stepped outside, la nena cooing softly in her arms. The community gathered nearby, voices mingling in laughter and conversation, a tapestry of connection woven from threads of pain and hope. The farmhouse, once a symbol of isolation and fear, had become a beacon of resilience, a testament to the enduring power of survival and solidarity. Emma's legacy was no longer one of secrets kept in darkness, but of truths spoken aloud and lives transformed. With the gentle weight of her daughter in her arms and the support of those who stood beside her, Emma faced the horizon with quiet confidence. The past had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. The future was hers to claim, a future born from courage, compassion, and the unbreakable bonds of community.